Chapter 28 Biogeochemical Cycling and Ecosystem Productivity. Section 28.4 Productivity of Plants. The bodies of living organisms in a community per unit area make up the standing crop of biomass. Biomass can be defined as the mass of organisms per unit area and is usually expressed in units of energy, example joules per meter squared, or it can be expressed in dry organic matter in tons per hectare or grams per meter squared. If you looked at a community, any type of community on our planet, most of the biomass that exists in this community is produced by plants. And then, of course, some of that biomass is passed on to herbivores and carnivores. There are some communities where this isn't true, that plants aren't the main measure of biomass. For example, in lakes and streams, often the herbivore and carnivore species make up most of the biomass. Plants are the primary producers of biomass, and this is because they have the ability to fix carbon through photosynthesis. And through this process, they produce glucose and other more complex carbohydrates, and using their metabolism, they can convert these simple organic molecules into more complex molecules of organic matter. The primary productivity of a community is the amount of biomass produced through photosynthesis per unit area and time. So we've added the element of time here. And primary productivity, it involves plants, so we're talking about plants. Primary productivity is usually expressed in units of energy, joules per meter squared per day, or in units of dry organic matter, kilograms per meter squared per year. So here's our simple graphical model showing photosynthesis. It involves sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. These are taken in by the plant, and in the chloroplasts, glucose is produced with the byproduct of oxygen. Through other metabolic activity, the plant can convert this glucose into other forms of organic matter, more complex organic molecules. Globally, primary production amounts to about 243 billion metric tons of dry plant biomass per year. That's a lot of production. The total energy fixed by plants in a community through photosynthesis is often referred to as gross primary productivity. Now, gross primary productivity doesn't represent what you actually measure in the field, because there are losses due to respiration. Plants have to respire just like animals, and that respiration uses some of the byproducts of photosynthesis that are produced. The glucose, it uses some of that in metabolism to produce other organic molecules and to just carry out metabolic activities. Subtracting respiration from gross primary production gives us net primary productivity, NPP. And this is what we can actually measure out in the field. Net primary productivity represents the rate of production of plant biomass that is available for consumption, so by herbivores, or consumed through heterotrophic organisms in decomposition. So we're talking about bacteria, fungi, and animals. The following table describes the approximate average net primary productivity for a variety of ecosystem types. And what's important to note here is that there is variation. And communities that have essentially mild temperatures and a lot of moisture have high net primary productivities, like tropical rainforest, estuary, swamps and savannas, swamps and marshes, deciduous temperate forest. Areas that are limited by their primary productivity, either because of cold temperatures or lack of moisture, have lower net primary productivities. So now savannas are lower than tropical rainforest. Boreal forest is lower than deciduous temperate forest. Grasslands are lower than most of the communities described above because of lack of precipitation and cold temperatures. And we can see polar desert, or polar tundra and deserts have extremely low net primary productivities in comparison to some of these other community types. So once again, the least productive ecosystems are those limited by heat energy or water. Of course, water is required for photosynthesis, and this includes communities or ecosystems like deserts and the polar tundra. The most productive ecosystems are systems with high temperatures, plenty of water, and lots of available soil nitrogen. This map shows us values of net primary productivity determined as kilograms of carbon per square meter per year, and we can see in areas where there's a lot of precipitation, high temperatures, we have high net primary productivity. So Brazil, Central Africa, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, little lower net primary productivity where we still have sort of moderate temperatures and high precipitation, southeastern North America, most of Europe, and Eurasia at a lower latitude, and so on. Areas of low primary productivity, desert areas like in the northwest of the United States and southern Mexico, northern Africa, southern Africa, the Middle East, central Australia, and the steppes of Eurasia and the Himalayas, and the tundra areas. They all have low net primary productivity. Here we have animations showing the variation in gross primary productivity. This variation is being caused by changes in the season. So this animation spans a period from 2000 to 2009, and it shows the monthly change. And what we should see is a shift in gross primary productivity as the sun and its location with higher levels of radiation and the production of heat energy changes geographically as the months change. So there you can see the greening of the quick greening of the northern hemisphere during the summer months, and then the winter months, the decline in gross primary productivity. And the movement of where highest productivity is near the equator, as that shifts where the high sun is. Oh, sorry, there wasn't monthly changes, it's daily changes. Okay, so that was, we looked at terrestrial gross primary productivity. So let's look at net primary productivity over the oceans. And what we can see in this map is that's limited to, or the highest net primary productivity in the oceans is around the boundary areas around the continents where water depth is less than 200 meters. And some of the more productive areas are at the end of estuaries. The open ocean, generally not very productive, especially in the subtropics, over the subtropical high pressure systems. And net primary productivity just outside of Antarctica is also quite low. You can see how the Gulf Stream increases net primary productivity by moving water from the east coast of the United States up towards Europe. So what kind of factors limit primary productivity? Um, well, overall, every productivity is limited by solar radiation. It's the ultimate factor controlling how much photosynthesis can take place. And parts of our planet, solar radiation becomes limiting because of changing sun angles and day lengths. We know the highest amount of solar radiation is found near the equator over a constant 1 year period. But there are other requirements by plants that determine primary productivity, and that includes carbon dioxide, which shouldn't be a factor because it's in the atmosphere and it's more or less uniform in its concentration. But water we know does change on our planet. Some areas receive precipitation input all year long in consistent form, like at the equator, while other areas, the savannas, have seasonal changes in precipitation. And of course, precipitation is changes in the middle and high latitudes with seasons. So those are some of the main factors, but some other factors that determine or control photosynthesis are temperature. We already mentioned moisture. Soil nutrient availability is another factor. Temperature, heat, controls the rate of plant metabolism, which in turn determines the amount of photosynthesis that can take place in chloroplasts. Most biological metabolic activity takes place within a range of 0 to 50 degrees Celsius. Optimal temperatures are somewhere in between 25 and 30 degrees Celsius temperature. And here we can see a graph showing the amount of net primary productivity that occurs in various ecosystems as a function of mean annual temperature. And low temperatures produce very little net primary productivity, while high temperatures can produce a lot. Water is the principal requirement for photosynthesis and main chemical component of most plant cells. In dry regions, there is a linear increase in net primary productivity with an increase in water availability. So more rain, more soil moisture, more net primary productivity, with all things equal. And that includes temperature. In the more humid forest climates of the world, plant productivity begins to level off at higher levels of precipitation. You can get too much precipitation. In waterlogged environments, of course, roots can't take up nutrients, so that can limit how much primary productivity can occur. And that's shown in this graph here. So we can see that 3,000 seems to be, 2,000 to 3,000 millimeters of mean annual precipitation seems to be the sweet spot in terms of maximum net primary productivity. Too much rain just doesn't allow for a nutrient uptake by roots because the soils are too saturated. Okay, the efficiency of solar radiation use. Depending upon location, between 0 and 5 joules of solar energy is received on each square meter of the Earth's surface every minute. And of course, we expect the maximums near the equator, minimums near the poles. However, solar radiation consists of many different wavelength bands of radiation, different colors, from blue to red. And not all of these different wavelengths are useful for photosynthesis. In fact, the reason why plants appear green is because that's what they reflect back to us. That is a particular color that is not used in photosynthesis. So what does this mean? Only a small proportion of the solar radiation that is received by plants is actually used for photosynthesis. Of the sunlight being received at the Earth's surface, only about 44% of this shortwave radiation occurs at wavelengths that can be used for photosynthesis. This portion of the spectrum of light from the sun is referred to as photosynthetically active radiation, or PAR. Yet even the most efficient plant species, most of which are crop plants, can only incorporate 3 to 10% of PAR into the production of biomass. And this includes crops like corn, sugarcane. These are some of the highly productive plants that use a good portion of the available PAR that's available. Other plants use very little. For example, plants in deserts only use a small portion of the PAR in photosynthesis that's available for them to use. Of the Earth's various biomes, tropical rainforests and coniferous forests are the most efficient, converting anywhere from 1 to 3% of the usable solar radiation into the production of biomass through photosynthesis. Deciduous forests achieve photosynthetic efficiencies between 0.5 and about 1%. Desert plants convert only 0.01 to 0.2% of the photosynthetically active radiation into the production of biomass. Let's just once again take a look at net primary productivity, and now the message I want to sort of end this discussion on is how much net primary productivity are we creating with our cropland, and of course, if we have cropland, that means there are no longer natural ecosystems that can produce net primary productivity. So here is once again a map showing the spatial distribution of net primary productivity measured in grams. So this is the average for a year. The next map shows how much net primary productivity we use with the production of food and fiber products for our well-being. So you can see in parts of the world, in India, in Europe, in southeastern North America, Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, we are using a lot, or producing a lot of net primary productivity with our crops and our use of fiber products, timber, and so on. So this is measured in grams. Here it is measured in human sort of net primary productivity as a percentage of local net primary productivity, relative to what a natural ecosystem would use. And we can see that these percents can be greater than 100%, because through cropping and irrigation, we can produce some really efficient, or I don't know if it's efficient, we can produce really productive human systems of crop growth or tree growth.